Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf, the podcast, a serial killer drama.
Shh, it's okay. It's okay. No, come on. No. Be quiet. Come on, that's it. No, come on. I've got things to do. You just lay still. That's good. Well done. No, it'll be over soon. Don't worry, let me just do this. It's fine, don't worry. Hello, this is your Werewolf Will speaking, and this is Werewolf the podcast. I'm currently telling my life story. We're on episode 2. Hopefully you'll listen to episode 1. This episode is entitled The Chief. Then another khaki-clad soldier entered the room. I smelt and sensed his seniority more than saw it, and I could feel his confidence as he took a steel chair from the side of the door and dragged it noisily to within a few feet of me. Jesus, that was an irritating sound. He'd done that on purpose. This man was in his early 50s and had no fear of me at all. I couldn't sense any anyway. His mind was locked and he was extremely calm. He was grey-haired and trim with not a bit of extra fat on him. A George Clooney look-alike in many ways. He had a scar that ran from his right temple and deep into what once had been an eye. It was now, well, I'll be honest, it was a fucking mess. A cloudy white orbit filled the space where a beautiful frosty blue eye should have been. He also had burns and marks running up from his neck on the right side of his body. This man had been on the wrong side of some pretty serious action at some pretty serious times. Amusingly though, for all the coolness and the calmness he portrayed, he showed tan lines where he wore his sunglasses regularly. Not so cool. His heart rate was surprisingly low, and he seemed relaxed compared to the other two men as he sat down and just let out a gentle sigh. As I looked at him, I realised that he was somehow sick. After running my godlike senses over him, I noticed the area in which his prostate was located was, well, there was a considerable amount of inflammation. The prostate was on the boundary of being cancerous in my humble opinion. I could tell that he drank and he smoked. He was very straight and, yes, very married. I could smell his wife's perfume. I think the fragrance is called something like Chloe. He was confident, but he maintained enough distance to ensure that I would not be able to reach him in whatever form that I took. He also knew that he needed to be close enough to me so that I could see his smile and his facial expressions clearly. That was just so we could engage properly in total communication. He'd been taught well. After placing his chair down over carefully on a cross that I had noticed made out of white tape on the floor, he stood and looked at me for an extended period of time. Eventually, he sucked his teeth, he sat down, and he gave out a very, very long sigh. He held a manila folder in his right hand and slowly crossed his legs, observing me in my cage. I knelt before him. I had no choice, and I spent my time trying to get eye contact. When I did catch his eye, I nodded and smiled in what was, I hoped, a confident and threatening manner. It did not affect this man at all. He smiled, pushing up the peak of his cap with the index finger of his right hand. His facial expression gave an air of amusement at my poor attempt to intimidate him. He stared at me for quite a long time, rotating the wedding band on his left hand with the fingers of his right. Was this some kind of tell, as we say in poker, or was it a proffered feint of one? I sensed a very wily fellow here. The force was strong in this one. He stopped his misdirection, flattened his trousers to his thighs, and slowly and with purpose opened the folder and started looking through several photographs and bits of paper. I could see that he was considering what he was going to say next. A small radio on his chest burst into static for a moment, and he removed it from his jacket and switched it off, put it into the pocket of his khaki trousers. I could see that he had an earpiece in his left ear, through which he was probably being offered advice or something from the people watching us. I also noticed there were as many cameras focused on him as there were on me. This was a really well planned procedure. The earpiece and the tape cross spoke of something that had been looked into in minute detail. As all these things started to soak in, I got the first hint that the situation I was in was going to be a very difficult one from which to extract myself. My posit, my werewolf soul thing I call Fen, went and sat behind him and had a quick perusals of the paper in the folder. Fen could not read, but he sent me the images of what he saw from his head into mine. Sharing each other's consciousnesses was, well, it was a bonus in this way. A lot of the papers had nothing to do with me. They were just there to pad out the paperwork. Several reports were written of people describing primary and secondary evidence of a werewolf-like creature attacking villages and soldiers as they fought. I read the top of the first report that described me as being well over 10 feet tall and weighing well over a ton. Amazing. There were several photos of me taken, some of them from above and some pictures from the CCTV that had been in the military zones. Not much there in that folder then. It could be that with all these cameras and with all this security and surrounding me and all that bollocks, they were just bluffing about how much info they actually had. Perhaps they realised I had a posit that would look at the papers. Maybe. Who knew? But I was an expert poker player, so all this info just built up a set of ideas in my mind. It would be interesting to see where they went with this. They were pretending, they were confident, and that they were in control, when in reality, they were crapping their respective pants and winging this whole thing as much as me. This may turn out to be a lot of fun, yet. Let's face it, they only had to make one mistake, and that would give me the out that I needed. He uncrossed his legs and placed his booted feet on the ground with a thump, thump. With my fine-tuned hearing, I could hear the conversation that was going on in his ear about communicating with me. He nodded to one of the cameras and leant forward in the chair. He bent low enough to get eye level with me in the cage. The man had listened to his body language experts on being non-threatening, or maybe just enough threatening in his posture. His following few words were shockingly unprofessional and unexpected. I mean, I would never expect an officer and a gentleman to be so uncouth. Well, screw me sideways. A werewolf. And he laughed. He laughed at me. I tried to fathom where he was from, but he had spoken with really no decipherable accent. He could have been from anywhere. This was really upsetting me. I bit my lip hard in response to my anger, and as it bled, I tried to hold back the wolf. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I looked past the seated soldier's shoulder and made eye contact with my posit. He shook his head in admonishment of me, wanting to change into the beast. He was not going to allow that. Whoever had captured me had been very smart with the size of this crate within which they'd put me. They had taken into account that if I changed into my beast, being in this small cage would be extremely uncomfortable. So I could not change. Posit was right. To wolfify at this stage would be silly. I decided I wasn't going to transform right away. It would give these people proof, but I was suitably irritated. He made the top of the naughty list that day. He would get his reward. It may take a while, but I had a while. A werewolf. The thing about which children's nightmares are made. Oh, and those crappy movies. How are you doing? I think this was a joke. I don't think it was a sincere question. I would shake your hand, but I like me arm, he laughed. I smiled in acknowledgement of his wonderful wit, while inside his laughter hurt. That pain of mine would be a regret of his. The humour just gave him a few more minutes of suffering when I got my hands on him. I would give him a few more moments of a painful life for his contemplation. The posit was circling and sniffling. It looked confused and then came back to the side of the cage and sat down, resting his head on the bottom of the bars by my feet. If he was a dog, he would have whimpered. He's not normal person mentally, Will. He's something else, Fen told me. The man in the chair was still holding my eye contact from when he had spoken before. He was doing that thing of giving me the long pause so that I felt obliged to fill it with words. This guy was good. The people in his ear told him about my elevated body systems in response to his comment. That was interesting. How were they doing that? Then I noticed a soft sore spot just above one of my shoulder blades. That was interesting. I turned to Fen's mind to ask him the question. What happened to my shoulder? Did you see? They stuck something in you. I thought they'd stabbed you, but it was just a big needle thing. Why? He replied. No worries. I think they've left something inside of me there in my shoulder. It's a wee bit sore. That doesn't sound okay, he replied again, and lifted his head to look back at the man. This person's got to go, you know. I know, I reassured him. It will be done, and it will be awful. I realised then that they may have pushed some monitoring device into my body and that they would be able to keep an eye on my vitals. Maybe they did not know my body would soon push it out to heal if I wanted, and that advantage would then be gone. The guy still just sat there, thinking he knew all the secrets of getting people to talk. He was probably a high-level interrogator or something. I smirked and looked down at my hands. I was trying to think of how I would handle this situation. I was somewhere I did not know, in a scenario I did not know, for some purpose I did not know, with people who knew exactly what I was. Even with my superb self-confidence, I did not have any idea as to my next step. Was I going to play the innocent card or the not-so-innocent card? I actually felt myself go hard in front of him through sheer excitement. I mean, I literally got erect. His eyes dropped to my lap. I could see that this outcome had actually rattled him. He exposed a micro-expression of shock and then showed a remarkable quick recovery to a calm smile. This was exciting, and I got him to react. When I had not spoken to fill the pause, he sat back in his seat, crossing his legs, and sighed again, resuming his perusal of the documents in his hand. Now nothing was said or done. I just stared. He sat there in silence, going through his notes, and I sat there silently thinking as quickly as I could about my next steps. I was chatting with my posit. He often needed reassurance that all was going to be okay. He was a little needy like that at times. I think I will take this really slow and kind of build up the tension. That's what they're trying to do with me, you see, Fen. So I will send that right back at them. Patience is key. Is that okay with you? The posit did the big yawny thing that big dogs do and sent a message to mine. I again suggest that you get yourself out of the cage and kill everybody in it that gets in your way. He mentally laughed and paused. But okay, you normally have the bestest plans. You have a good brain for torture in that skull of yours. I can't wait to see what we're gonna do. Right, I said, but I think I'm gonna have to be extremely clever in this scenario. Then I relaxed as I sat back, never taking my eyes from the man. After a while, the old warrior got up from the seat, turned his back to me, and slowly dragged the chair back to its place by the door. The scraping of the legs of the chair as it was dragged across the concrete floor went through me to my very soul, and he knew it. He then turned to the two soldiers at the door. The soldiers nodded at him in recognition, and he stood waiting. "Please open," he said to what seemed to be the door. A sound like some complicated unlocking, because I suppose it was some complicated unlocking was heard. The door swung open, and then he left, followed by the two soldiers. As the door closed, it sealed itself after him. The relief had perceptibly poured off the two escorting soldiers as they went with him. I loved this. Exciting things were going down. I loved this. That's the end of episode 2. I hope you're enjoying it. If you are, there is a description below that you can go and find a link to buy me a coffee. That would be wonderful. Of course, last thing to say. All you humans, I love you. Bye.
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf, the podcast, a serial killer drama.